How we doing? I know everyone's been here for a long time, and Mass Youth Lacrosse asks a lot of coaches in terms of certification and training and risk management. And my community is new to Mass Youth Lacrosse this year, and I think it's incredibly valuable, and all of the athletes that we coach will benefit from all of this. So thank you for being here, and I'm Coach Sue. Thank you for your time. My name is Tosh Adams, and I am the girls director in Scituate. I've been coaching lacrosse for approximately a decade, mostly youth lacrosse. I'm going to be coaching the JV girls team at Scituate High School this year. My first time going back to high school coaching in 20 years. So it's been a while. I spent most of my time coaching soccer prior to the past decade. So I know I went to the Mass Youth Lacrosse Convention in January. Did anybody else go to that? Yeah, which I thought was super awesome. And one of the things I picked up there was Katie Conover from Stonehill said that every coach is a thief and just sees things and steals their ideas and make it their own. So my goal today is that you see one thing on here that resonates with you. It's probably stuff you already knew, but maybe it just makes something click, you steal it, you make it your own. So raise your hand if you're coaching 5th through 8th graders. All right, raise your hand if you're not coaching 5th through 8th graders. Okay, what grade are you coaching?
JV.
Okay, awesome. So I think it's super applicable to everybody. I even think it's applicable to the younger kids as well. So I think probably, bear with me if this doesn't work, technology is not my strength. Probably most of us are super familiar with all of the benefits that youth sports provides or sports participation, like everything from anxiety and depression rates go down, suicide attempts go down, drug use, cigarettes, binge drinking, kids do better in school, they're more likely to be in leadership roles, they're more likely to go on to college. I mean, it goes on and on, countless studies across the board. One of the unfortunate things that's happening with youth sports is by about age 13, 70% of kids are dropping out of youth sports. And there's a couple of reasons when we look across those metrics. It's not a perfect picture. Kids are specializing, maybe they're picking up jobs, they feel like they have to focus on schoolwork. Their decrease in recreation opportunities, so now it's become, club is the only thing that's available to them. They're not sure they want to play club in those sports. They're feeling an increase in pressure. Maybe those sports are an increase in time commitment. Some of the other things are they don't feel successful and it's no longer fun. So those are things in our control that we can change and we can make it better. When we're working with middle school athletes in particular, this is a really challenging time for kids. And I know that we all went through this as humans, and we probably remember the physical changes that happen in our body and how incredibly awkward it is. And when you're playing a sport, it happens at such a huge pace, right? A very varying pace. Everybody is a bio individual. And you might have kids in 5th grade that are fully going through puberty, and those kids are going to have a temporary athletic advantage. And you might have kids that are struggling to get there even by 8th grade, and they're feeling slow and they're feeling weak and like it's hard for them to keep up. When they're going through these huge growth spurts, you might have had a girl who could run like a gazelle. All of a sudden she looks like she's plodding around like an elephant because the limbs are longer than the torso and they can't quite figure out, how to make their body work. And at the same time, they're becoming really self-conscious about their body and what it looks like. And they may be running to the drawer to get ready for practice and they throw on a t-shirt and that t-shirt fit them in the fall. But by the time they show up at practice, they realize it's really small and it's too tight. So all of these awkward things are happening and they're comparing themselves to others. And at the same time that their bodies are changing, so are their brains in an incredibly complex way that I fully don't understand, and I'm sure most of us in this room don't. And we're all parents, and we see it, and we see the things that they're going through. And does everybody in this room coach girls? I sort of missed the beginning. Yes? Okay. So I think boys go through this in a different way as well, but it becomes a really challenging time for female athletes because they're unsure of their place in the world, they're unsure of their friend group, and they're really having a hard time. As a parent, I have 2 middle schoolers right now. I see it to varying degrees, but they're looking to increase their independence from me as a parent, but they still want healthy relationships with adults. They still want to know what their boundaries are. So this is where the role of a coach becomes really important, because we give these kids a healthy interaction with an adult. We give them clear boundaries in terms of what our expectations are. And they want to be a part of something, they want to belong, they want to be accepted, and playing on a team is a way for them to have a sense of community. Why do kids play sports? You know, just like all of us coaches, we're all here for different reasons. Kids play sports for very different reasons. You know, maybe their parents signed them up, maybe they said they have to have an extracurricular, maybe they have to get off video games, they want to, you know, get them exercise. But if you ask a kid why they play sports, the number one reason is because it's fun. And that is the answer even when they are in high school. The second reason is for friendships. They're looking to make friends or to be with their friends. And third, and this is a middle school specific one, and maybe even carries over to high school, they want to fit in. They want to fit in with their friends. Okay? And the fourth reason is fitness. And I'm not saying your average 11 or 12-year-old says, hey, I want to be fit, I'm going to go play lacrosse, although I think it's a damn good way to get fit. It's because as humans, when we go and we exercise, we naturally get these neurotransmitters like serotonin and endorphins and dopamines, and they make us feel good. So we develop the association from a very young age between movement and feel-good neurotransmitters. So that's one of the reasons that kids go to sports. Now it's our goal to make those 4 F's turn into a love and a passion for lacrosse, right? They get brought to the table with those things, and then we build an environment where they feel successful and they develop a love and a passion for this particular sport. So just like kids come for lots of reasons, coaches come for lots of reasons. And I got a couple quotes sprinkled in here. John Wooden is definitely a favorite. But I want you to think about right now, it's a privilege to coach, right? It's a privilege to have the opportunity to have an impact on a young person's life. And naturally we have that just because of the nature that we're a coach. So think about, you know, why you coach. Do you coach because you love this sport and you want to impart everything you know to the athletes? Do you coach because you want to bond with one of your children and you want to share that experience with them? Do you coach because you had a kid who was reluctant and maybe having a hard time and you say, you know what, I'm going to go through this with you. I'll coach with you. I'll do it if you show up. Or do you coach maybe because you saw somebody else and you didn't think they were doing a great job? And you're like, I'm going to throw my hand in here. I can do a better job. Whatever it is, think about why you coach, and then think about why you coach the way you coach. Oftentimes, many of us default back to our last coach. And if we were athletes ourselves, that's probably, you know, maybe it's high school, maybe it's college, maybe it's post-college. And so our default coach before we developed our own coaching style is probably modeled on our last coach. That's not always appropriate for youth sports. You know, some things we can learn, right? We can be the thief and take those things, but then we have to really think about who our audience is and what is the best way to connect with those kids. How do we want our athletes to feel? What do we want to make them feel at the end of a practice when they're going through drills, right? And what do we want them to achieve? In our program, we have a list of developmental goals for every age level, you know, 3rd and 4th, 5th and 6th, and so on, and all the things that we want our athletes to be exposed to by the time they're done with their youth career. So for kids, they want to feel valued. They want to feel understood. They want to feel welcome, and they want to feel successful. And it's our job to make every athlete, every recreation athlete, which is what we're coaching, to feel those things. And here's a few strategies for how we can do this. The first thing I think we need to do as coaches is to build rapport, right? Build rapport. Has anybody heard of John O'Sullivan, the Changing the Game project? Okay, definitely worth a Google. John O'Sullivan was a professional soccer player and a coach, and he started a foundation basically designed to put the fun and the proper development back in youth sports and not the emphasis on strictly winning and building businesses. Anyway, so His quote really resonates with me. Every child is one relationship away from a successful life. So again, we're not talking necessarily about X and O's, but we're talking about the kids who show up, maybe the kids who are only raised by grandparents who come to your practices, maybe the kids who are not sure what their identity is right now and they're looking to have a healthy connection with an adult. As youth sports coaches, we have the opportunity to make an impact on these kids. So building rapport, one of the ways that we can do this, I call this the 3 E's. If you haven't figured out yet, I do like alliteration. This one's a little bit of a stretch because they're not all E's, but expectations, setting expectations, earning respect. Now that's more about respect, but it's that respect has to be earned. As adults, you know, I think the way that I raise my children is that somebody who's in a position of authority has your respect in terms of you're supposed to listen to them and understand them. But as a coach, we really have to earn respect by building a relationship. They may tell me what to do in terms of how I have to behave, but if they want to influence my actions, they have to earn my respect first. And then the third piece is an environment, creating an environment in which kids feel that they can be successful. You know, so expectations. Set expectations, and this is something that is done on an ongoing basis. And I think a lot of times, because we are athletes ourselves, we show up and we feel that the athlete that we're coaching has everything in their head that we've ever learned in our entire life. They know when they're in 3rd grade that if a coach blows a whistle that they should run into a coach. They know if they're on the sideline that they need to be supporting their teammates when they're not in the game. And these are just kids. And even though they're athletes, they're not naturally imbued with this knowledge, right? This has to come from properly setting expectations. So that looks like clearly communicating at the beginning of a season. What are your expectations? We had a talk with our 7th and 8th graders this week. You know, one of the first things that we happen to mention, because it came up before we even had a chance, was cell phones. Everybody's got to have their cell phone in a concealed bag for the entirety of practice, unless, of course, they're diabetic and need to check their blood sugar, or there's a pre-established reason and they can communicate that with coaches. We want, you know, we set expectations for their interactions with coaches, for their interactions with their teammates, and their interactions with each other, right? Things like be on time, have all of your gear. You know, it's your responsibility, not your mom and dad's, to make sure you have your pinny, your mouth guard, and your stick. You want to have water. When a coach is talking, you need to listen. Also, things like be present. When you're at lacrosse, be present. Leave the day behind you, show up. Be ready to learn, support your teammates, what it means to be a teammate. For us in Scituate, it's new this year. We've always been single grade based. Moving to MYL, we're now combining grades, right? So they're combined with 2 different groups of kids, and their teammates are now not just the one team. It's, you know, there's 2 teams on Sundays, and then there's the select league. So a teammate, we defined it for them very clearly. A teammate is anybody in 7th and 8th grade who plays girls lacrosse in Scituate. These are all your teammates. They may be on your practice squad, they may be on your Sunday squad, they may be on your Friday squad. And all of them deserve your respect, your kindness, and your support. Setting these expectations is an ongoing job. It's not something you just do at the beginning of the season. We do it at the beginning of a session. We do it at the beginning of an activity or a drill. And, you know, we do it at the beginning of games. And something that requires consistency. So I had to look this up. I didn't know who sang or wrote the cheer song. It's apparently a guy by the name of Gary Portnoy. But earning respect from your athletes is not that hard. And I think one of the super easiest ways and the fastest ways to do this is to not just know their names, because chances are if you're coaching 7th and 8th grade, you've been with these kids for a long time, and I hope you know their names by now. There might be new ones coming in, learning their names, but using their names, knowing their names, and using their names with praise. We all have something in our brains called our reticular activating system, or the RAS. It sits like in our hippocampus, definitely not a neuroscientist, but somewhere back here. And it's responsible for filtering thoughts, right? So it determines what thoughts go into our conscious and what thoughts go into our subconscious. So basically it tells us what's important. Do you mind telling me your name?
Andy.
Andy. Okay. My husband's Andy. So Have you ever been in a crowd of people, like maybe you're at a stadium or a concert or in a grocery store, and you know, there's lots of noise, but you hear your name and you turn around and you're wondering if they're talking to you? So that's your RAS at work. That's your reticular activating system. It has taught us from a really young age that our name is important, and we know that. So when we combine a kid's name with a compliment, with praise, we are doing two things. The praise is releasing dopamine, so they're feeling good, and it's building trust. So they now hear their coach's voice. Andy, you're doing such an awesome job paying attention tonight. I really like the fact that you're making eye contact with me. It's making me feel like my message is getting delivered. So thank you for that. Okay, so you're complimenting them with their name and a specific compliment. It's releasing dopamine for them, and it's building trust. So learn their names, use their names, connect it with praise. We'll get into a little bit more details on this. Coaches need to earn respect by being on time, right? We want our players to be on time. We need to be on time. Being on time for a coach is at least 15 minutes early. Be organized. Be consistent, right? Consistent in your treatment of your athletes, consistent in your treatment of the team, and follow through. If you say, hey, next week we're going to play a really fun game at the end of practice and I'll have prizes for you, you better show up with those prizes, right? And you better actually have that game. And the next thing is connect and collect. So how many times have you transitioned from somewhere? Maybe you've come into your house from work, or you've been out, or your kids are with a sitter, or maybe you've watched your spouse do this, and you come home, and as you pull in the driveway, there's like bikes out and scooters and balls, or maybe you step into your kitchen and the dishes are all over the place, and you clearly told your kids, hey guys, when you're done with your bike, it's got to go in the garage, or please clean up after yourself, put the dishes in the dishwasher. But for some reason, it didn't happen, right? And our instinct is to be like, can you go outside and take care of your bike right now? Put it in the garage. We talked about that. Can you take care of the dishes, right? You want to get right into it. You will be so much more successful if you just pause for a second, take time to connect with your kids, right? In this case, your athletes, and collect them before you give that information. You say, hey, how was your day? What did you do today, right? I just came from this meeting. It was really awesome. There were so many coaches there. I can't wait to start the season. Or you say, it looks like everybody's pretty happy and in the middle of something. I need you guys to just start to wrap up what you're doing and put away the bikes, put away the dishes. It's the same thing with your athletes, right? Bring them in and connect with them and let them know what they're going to be doing when you're dividing them up. Let them know what the plan is. Collect them. Do this before games. Do this at halftime. Don't just start barking out orders or giving criticism or feedback. Make sure you are connecting with them first. And the last E is environment, okay? Be intentional about the environment you create at practice with your teams, with your athletes. And a really great way to do this is to be very consistent about your rhythm and your routine. When you have a predictable flow to your practices, you put kids at ease and they feel like they can be successful. They feel like they know what's coming at them. And look, don't get me wrong, I am not all about the soft skills. I am very competitive and I want to win, and I know that kids can do really hard things when they're asked. But if you want to build success for all your athletes, this is an important tool. Read the room, right? So perfect example of this is we had a couple years ago, this was the COVID year, and it was like one of the first times we took off the masks, and the girls were just like electric. They were dancing, they were happy, like we couldn't really focus on any drills, and I called everybody in and I was about to say something lacrosse related, and this one girl just did a couple backflips, and I was like, I didn't know you could do that. That was pretty awesome. And then someone else was like, hey, Coach Tosh, I can do that too. Do you want to see? And like normally I would have been like, no, like you can show me later. We got to get on Twitter saying, I was like, sure, show me your backflips. And then I was like, does anybody else have anything they want to share? So we just had like a mini 7-minute talent show, and like it got really goofy and kids just told us different things. And that gives kids the opportunity to like feel comfortable, feel like they're a part of something. You see sides of them that you wouldn't normally see. So just read the room and don't be so focused on, your routine. The last one of the environment, their time and share time. So we do pretty predictable practices as far as the format. But at the beginning, if we're doing partner passing or we're starting at the wall, we have a wall in Situate that we put in when we did our field project, I let that be their time, right? The kids' time. I'm not correcting their passing technique. I'm not telling them, different ways that they could work on the wall. We do have that opportunity as well. I let them talk about what happened in Mr. Gillespie's class, or catch up with a friend who went to private school and they haven't seen because they haven't been together since last week, or talk about what happened at the game, or whatever it is that they want to talk about. Maybe it's, some celebrity or Outer Banks, right? But give them that time and then go into what you want to do, and then communicate. Then you collect and connect, right? And then share time. I'll get a little bit more into that, but that's just something that you can do at the end. Okay. This one sort of speaks to my coaching philosophy in general. And if you think of a normal distribution curve, right? That bell curve, 80% of your kids fall under the bell curve, right? They're your average performers. You've got your 10% top performers and your 10% least developed, okay? If we're thinking of traditional statistics, most people will say, well, aim everything towards that 80%, right? Set your drills to there, that's where you want to hit it. So my approach is to actually ignore the 80% and to set your bar for the top 10% in that is the standard that you push towards, right? When you're setting your drills, those are your most competitive athletes. Those are the kids that are the most talented. Maybe they have the most lacrosse acumen, and you are pushing everybody to their standard. Because if you set the bar below their level, you will lose them quickly because they will be bored and they're not going to continue to develop. But if you set the bar higher for them, then everyone else is pulled up by their actions. Then what you have to do is you have to go and collect. You have to collect that bottom 10%, and sometimes that looks like you've just explained a drill, and your bottom 10% are either new to the sport, less developed athletes, or in some cases, maybe this is more in the younger ages, they've got some behavioral challenges. But if you have an extra coach who can help those kids and make sure that somebody's focusing on them, explaining to them where to go, what to do, I find that this really helps everybody move along at a high level. So what does that look like in practice? You want to create a competitive, team-oriented culture. We need to focus on effort and progress over outcome, right? It's always focusing on the process versus the outcome, and then have high standards for all of your kids. How do you create a competitive, team-oriented culture? It has a lot to do with what you encourage, what you acknowledge, what you praise. So you want to praise hustle, you want to praise sportsmanship, and you want to praise good teammates. Let the kids go through share time, which we will talk about, because that's going to create an opportunity where every kid is going to feel valued and heard, even the ones who are your less developed athletes. And then be intentional. Be intentional about the way you divide your kids. And this, I highly, highly recommend you figure this out before you go to practice and have it on a sheet, because there's nothing worse for an athlete, right? It's like, remember when you had two captains and you had picking teams and you have the last one picked? Even when we're coaches, even when we're savvy and we're trying to figure it out ahead of time and we're looking around, even if you're saying, you're over here because you're a great player, right? Or you're over here because you're a less developed player. No matter how we do it, kids know. But if you are just reading off names when you're dividing them up, then they're not really worrying about when they're going to be picked and who they're going to be picked with. They just see it as all divided up. So sometimes you want to divide them up by ability, right? If you're doing skill stations and you want, your better players with your better players and your less developed players with your less developed players. Sometimes you don't want to do that. Sometimes you want them mixed. Sometimes you want to, give them a little bit of opportunity maybe to be with their grade level, because they're going to be moving up and down with their grade level, or not down, just up. Sometimes, maybe they're with their Sunday team. Sometimes they're with their practice squads. And anytime that you see girls battling in a practice, praise it, acknowledge it. Be like, Bridget and Izzy, that was fantastic. I love the way you just battled for the ground ball. And then tell them to look each other in the eye, help each other up if they get knocked over, really call out when they're battling hard. I think part of feeling awkward at this age is not knowing when it's okay to compete and not knowing who it's okay to compete with. So if they're not sure where their place is in the social hierarchy and they're feeling uncomfortable, well, if I compete with her, is she not going to be interested in being my friend? So if you develop a culture in which everyone competes all of the time and everyone supports each other in the process, and then, put prizes on the line, put pride on the line. So, you can have the losing team pick the punishment the winning team pick the punishment for the losing team, or they've got to pick up all the balls, or we do a competition night every year where we divide up by blue and white because those are our colors, and the teams are, we've always done it mixed grade, and then we have pizza at the end, and the winning team gets to have the pizza first, and if there's more for them to have seconds, they get to have pizza. So just things like that to encourage a competition culture. Focus on effort and progress over outcome. So this is where knowing the names and being really specific in your language is super important. Be very careful with the words you use and be very specific. I'll give examples in just a second. Celebrate their progress. So if you have a less developed athlete and you're doing a shooting drill, a lot of times I see so many times we have this set up, and our coaches, as soon as the ball starts going in the net, everyone just starts saying the same thing. What do you think they're saying? Anybody?
Good job.
Yeah, good job, good shot, right? Good shot, good shot, good shot. Well, most of the time that we do a shooting drill that's not a defended shooting drill, we don't have a goalie in there, so we're not going to pelt the goalie. It's pretty easy to get the ball in the net. So telling them that good shot is not very specific feedback. But if you're doing like a split and rip drill, or they're coming from a dodge into that position, you can start to give them feedback on how they're transitioning from their dodge, or you totally sold that dodge, or your footwork was great, or your hands got back, right? And you can give them incremental points of progress so that those bottom athletes, those less developed players, have something that they're feeling good about, and also your elite players or your more developed players in the process, like you're refining what they're doing because you're giving them very specific technique rather than just saying good shot. Acknowledge when things are hard. Teaching defense in girls lacrosse is really hard. Teaching somebody a roll dodge for the first time is really hard. Getting somebody to catch with their offhand or to throw consistently with their offhand, those things are hard. So tell them, yeah, this is hard, but we can do hard things, and we just get better at doing hard things in the process. Embrace failure across the board. Tell them that failure is information, right? And this is one of the things that we tell our coaches so many times over, is don't coach the on-ball player, right? Let the on-ball player make the decisions. It is such an important part of the learning process. So they're out there, let them make the decisions, let them make the wrong decisions, let them make the right decisions, and learn from that process. And when they make the wrong decision, talk to them about it, ask them about it, and say, hey, that's okay. What do you think you could do differently next time? And if they want to be creative, so many coaches that I grew up sort of in my lacrosse coaching career with were all about the X's and O's and fundamentals, and all the shooting has to be overhand. And every girl now watches Boston College and Charlotte North, and they're watching sidearms and behind the back and Kenzie Kent and Kayla Trainer and all that. They want to do that stuff. If we want kids to love this sport, we've got to encourage that stuff too. And they're youth athletes, and this is the perfect environment for them to do that. So here's an example of feedback. Things you can say instead of just good shot or nice job. You've probably seen them all up there, but like, way to get your arms back, Sarah, or good stick protection, Mickey. That's it. Better footwork, Bailey, meaning like better than last time, right? So you're using their name, you're being specific, and you're letting them know that you care about them and they're doing a good job. Again, have high standards for all, right? You're not going to lower your standards just because an athlete is less developed. When they don't meet that standard or they can't execute, talk about the effort, talk about the progress. Know your athletes and how they learn. This one took me a while to figure out as a coach, because I felt like the athletes who couldn't execute on a drill, if nobody could execute on a drill, that one was fully on me. I didn't do a good job explaining it. But if there's only specific ones that couldn't execute, they're probably not paying attention to me, right? They're not listening. But in fact, Some kids learn, like if I could sit in front of a group of kids and say, all right, you step out on that cone, you step out on that cone, and you step out on that cone. I want you to start with the ball, and you're going to pass it to Andy, who's going to pass it to them, and you're going to come and you're going to set a pick. I mean, I would slow it down. And some kids totally take that all in. Other kids will see other people do it, and then they'll be like, I'm, the fourth in line, and then they'll get it. And then there's a kid altogether that doesn't get it until they do it themselves. Until they do it themselves 3 or 4 times. So know that about your athletes and be supportive throughout the process, that some of them, it just takes longer. That's just how they process things. Don't overcorrect. This is the age of self-consciousness. They think that if you're talking to them, that everyone else on the team is watching you just talk to them. If you're giving them feedback in the middle of a drill, keep it quick, keep it concise. If you want to give them mechanical feedback, pull them out of the drill and do it on the side so it's not holding everybody else up and then making them feel like all the eyes are on them. So this is one of the ways that we do share time with the older kids, is priming everybody for wins. So with the younger kids, at the end of practice, everybody likes, like you ask a rhetorical question, all the hands go up with the little kids, right? They can't wait to have their turn. So over winter skills, we did something called stick stories. Because I told the kids they all had homework and they had to spend time with their stick. So I want you to name your stick. And then I'm going to ask you to tell me about an adventure that you and your stick went on, whether you went and passed with your siblings or you went for a hike or took it. So then I would take my stick and mic it up and say, all right, what's your name? This is all in a big group. And what's your stick's name? And a lot of them like making it up on the fly. And then they're telling us what their stick story is. One little girl, this was the cutest thing to me. She came up at the end of practice because she didn't get called on. Coach Tosh, yes, I have to tell you my stick story. I said, okay, Elle, this is a new stick. I was like, oh, what's your stick's name? She said, Bill. I said, oh, it's nice to meet you, Bill. She said, my stick has the best adventure. I said, what the? She said, I got it from Santa, so my stick has been down a chimney and on a sleigh. I was like, you cannot beat that, right? So they love the opportunity to share. With the older kids, you have to pry it out of them a little bit. So we do priming for wins. So this is another way of using that RAS, that reticular activating system. So if I were to tell you right now that I just got a brand new car, and it's, I'm not good with cars. It's a Jeep, and it's red, and it's super cool, and I talked a lot about my red Jeep. When you go home and you're driving on Route 3, you're probably going to start to notice red Jeeps, right? Because that has entered your RAS somehow. So if you tell everybody before a session, right, and this has become a standard practice, that at the end of practice today, we're going to call on you, and you're going to have to tell us 3 wins. We're going to call on 3 people, and you're going to have to tell us 1 win. So all practice, they're thinking about what's something that they can turn into a win. What's something that they found success at that night, that they did well, whether or not, they won all the ground balls in a drill, or they fixed their footwork, or they got their arms back, or they were able to make catches on their offhand, whatever it is, they start thinking about it because they don't know who I'm going to call on, right? So then at the end of the practice, you call on 2 or 3 people, and when you call on that person, everybody celebrates the success of that person, and you cheer them on, and you hoot and you holler, and you give them high fives and say, yes, you did, and I saw you do that, and that was awesome. It puts everybody collectively in a positive mindset, and that will spread throughout your entire team. And then I think the standards absolutely have to apply to coaches, right? Take responsibility when things don't go well. Always have a practice plan. Sometimes as coaches, you think that something's going to work out beautifully. It may have even worked out in the past or with a different team, and it just like on a given day, it doesn't work out. Have something else in your back pocket at all times and be willing to say, you know what, I probably didn't explain this very well today. We're just going to scrap this drill. We're going to play penny tag. We're going to play steal the bacon. We're going to do the clearing game, whatever it is. Have an audible in your pocket to just change the tone, because there's nothing worse than when a drill doesn't work and everyone's having a hard time with it. And sometimes it's just not worth fighting through. This is just summary. I'm not going to go through all of these, and that is really it. I think that it's an incredible privilege to be a youth sports coach, and we have a really important age group that we are responsible for, and kids that are going through a lot of things. I know we've all seen it. We don't know if it's social media or the pandemic, but the increases in anxiety and depression. I know on a team of 7th grade last year that we knew at least 50% of the girls were on a prescribed medication for anxiety and depression. So we never know what these kids are dealing with. And if we can provide an environment where they feel safe, they feel valued, they feel welcome, and they can find success playing a sport, like, you don't know what the impact's going to be on the rest of their life. So thank you for doing your job. That's all I got.